Hey everybody, I've been noticing lately that a lot of these carburetors that come in for rebuilds have what only can be described as an alarmingly high setting on the floats, or sometimes quite low. It's obvious that people are chasing their tails a little bit on float adjustment. It's easy enough to establish the baseline. Once you've figured out what your top fuel pressure, your highest fuel pressure is, that's the number that you want to use to have your fuel halfway up the sight glass. That would be the same as a typical Holly bowl with the brass sight plug. Same height. Carburetor needs to be level. The way that you make it level is either use a pocket level or your cell phone with the correct app, or you can just use the carburetor as a level. If you make the fuel the same height on both sides of the bowl, it's level. At that point, if you had 7 pounds, you would make sure the fuel, you would adjust it to get the fuel at the center of the window, loosen the lock nut, raise it, lower it. If you have a belt drive that has 3 or 4 pounds in an idle, when it's idling, the fuel will be at the bottom edge of the hole. When you rev it up, it'll be in the middle. If you don't use that method, or don't want to use that method, you can also use the measurement, which this is a 3/8 drill bit. It gets you pretty close. Set it so that it just touches the float, and that will get you very close on just about any application. You can also tell if your fuel pressure gauge is accurate or not. If you set the float at the proper height and the fuel is not where it belongs in the window, it's a good sign that the fuel pressure is higher or lower than what you think. If you take a bowl off and the float is sunk extremely deep in the fuel, it's a pretty good bet that you've got too much fuel pressure. We've been having a lot of problems with gauges lately. The accuracy of them is kind of scary, actually. It's not very good at all. Not sure what the answer is. We're trusting these expensive engines to cheap, poorly manufactured gauges. The other thing on the height is if you get them too high, which I've seen a lot of in the last few days, the float gets high enough to actually hit the vent whistle, which holds the needle and seat open, and it actually floods over as if there was something wrong with the needle and seat, when in reality it was just a poorly adjusted float. It also can be from having the fuel pressure extremely low, which allows you to run the float much higher to get your fuel level where it belongs. So the best bet is to get a baseline, put it back together, check it on the car, and that'll give you a pretty good idea whether or not your gauge is accurate and whether or not your settings are where they belong. Hope you all have a good day. See you later.